I seen Obsession? Yes, I have, and I really do like it. Probably one of my favorite movies I've seen thus far, at least in the theaters. You got Halloween 2018. That's probably my best theaters.
Are you going to make a
But
lore build for
Obsession was a close second. Are you gonna make an Obsession lore build? Probably not, man. Like I said before, I'm done with the lore build series. I don't really enjoy doing them anymore. And bada bing, bada boom. The person who played Nikki Freeman,
I wish, dude, I love the lore build series more than anything in the fucking world.
Man. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. I think she's probably gonna be like.
What the fuck just happened? Huh? Did you say lore build series? So, for some reason, I had the uncontrollable urge to make another lore build video, and considering that I love the lore build series so much, what better movie to make it on than one of my favorite movies from 2026, being Obsession by Curry Barker. For our first perk, we have Friends Till the End. So the main premise of this movie is that our main character, Bear, is deeply in love with a girl named Nikki Freeman, and his desire is so severe that he takes a supernatural one-wish willow and says this:
I wish Nikki Freeman loved me more than anyone in the fucking world.
Stripping Nikki of her free will and giving her the uncontrollable urge to be with Bear until death does them part. For our next perk, we have Furtive Chase, and this movie has a pretty big emphasis on shadows and lighting. For a lot of this movie, our quote-unquote antagonist Nikki is completely encased in shadows, to the point where sometimes you can't even really tell she's there, and even if you can tell she's there, the shadows are so prevalent on her face that you can barely tell what her intentions are, whether she's being flirty or malicious or anything. For our third perk, we have Remember Me, and this perk plays into the aspect of the movie where sometimes the real Nikki pops out and reveals herself, but then gets quickly suppressed right after.
Hey, the takers.
Showing us, and more importantly Bear, that this is just a pale imitation of the woman he supposedly loved, and the real Nikki is trapped within her own body watching somebody else live out her life, and there's nothing that she can do about it. And for our final perk, we have Dark Devotion. Since Wish Nikki is a very extreme interpretation of the jealous girlfriend stereotype, she will go to any lengths to ensure that her and Bear stay together no matter what. To the point where if anybody even dares to get in her way, they will meet a very gruesome and very untimely demise. Anyways, that is about it for the build, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. So, I just chucked myself a whole thing of Cosmic Rainbow C4, so I'm going to try to ride this caffeine train as much as I possibly can, and I'm going to kind of need it because for some reason, even though I really like this movie, being Obsession of course, I find it very hard to actually make the likes and dislikes for it. Like I tried last night, but I was just unable to do it. And I think the main reason for that is because this movie has just been so hyper analyzed down to the motherfucking bone that me as a casual fan can't really talk about it and bring significance to the conversation because I'm a casual viewer. Like, I don't really look too deep into stuff, but at the same time, I really fucking like this movie. But I'm gonna try my best, and the first thing that I really liked about this movie is obviously Indy Neveretti's performance as Nikki Freeman. I was very impressed with Indy's performance in this movie, and to make it even more impressive, I think this is like one of her first ever movies as well. I don't know if that's completely true. I haven't checked her IMDb whatsoever, but if that's the case, I think she's going to be making a lot of great movies in the future, and I'd love to see her in like a slasher movie one day. I think she'd make for a terrific final girl, even though in this movie she kind of plays the villain, but at the same time, if you look into it deep enough, she's really actually the victim out of everybody. Well, you know, everybody knows that at this point, but she did a phenomenal job, and honestly, she carried this movie. And not saying like everybody else in this film was like bad by any means, but like her performance is like on another level compared to everybody else. But I think the main thing that I liked about her performance in this movie is her ability to switch between different personalities like on a dime. She kind of reminds me of that guy from Split. I forget his name. I think it's James McAvoy. That like 1 minute she's this very naive, very playful, very childish, very reliant human being, then switching to her actual self, her actual Nikki self, and then immediately switching back to her like little Wish self. Like, it's crazy how well she's able to do that. And on top of that, the music, like, making like the cues of that's actually happening. Like, you know, sometimes like when she's like engaging with Bear in some way, whether it's kissing or something like that, the music is very nice and very like very soothing, and then it just immediately stops, and then she's like, what the fuck? Oh, and it freaks out. It's really cool. I think the best part of her overall acting is by far her physical acting, specifically with her facial expressions. Like, there's certain parts in the movie where she's very creepy, but yet very charming at the same time. Like, for example, with the I'm Your Freaking Nikki scene, where she smiles and she's looking very terrifying. But then again, I'm like, I'd let you lure me into a dark alley any day. It's like, I don't want to be weird when I say that, but like, you cannot tell me that you wouldn't trust that face. Or would I? I don't know. If I was in the situation, I don't know what I would do, honestly. But I think the best example of her physical acting is the corner scene where she's, you know, the uncanny look, and, you know, with her approaching Bear like a cat, also the flower pot scene, and then it's just a continuous rise in creepiness and build up and build up and build up, and then she puts the flower pot down and it's just completely gone. Her ability to just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth is just so fucking phenomenal, man. But none of this would have been possible without my next like, and that is the director of this film, Curry Barker. And I think the main reason I like Curry Barker so much in this movie is the fact that he reminds me a lot of John Carpenter when he was first making films back in the day. Like, for his ability to take such a low budget and make such a phenomenal film that is breaking records in the box office, very much like John Carpenter when he made Halloween all those years ago. Also, his lighting reminds me a lot about John Carpenter as well. Like, how horror movies work nowadays is, even though the villain is in complete darkness, seemingly in complete darkness, you can still see the villain clear as day. Like, there's no mystery, there's no anticipation of what they look like, they're just there for your showing. But in this movie, there are some scenes where you can barely make out that Nikki is in the corner of the room, or you can barely make out what her face is looking like at that very moment. Like that scene where she goes to Barry's front door, or not Barry, Bear's front door at the beginning of the movie, and the only thing you can really make out is the glimmer in her eyes. Like, phenomenal lighting in this movie, but also his storytelling, how he's able to make a story that is so compelling, and also you can just like watch endlessly and just keep finding new things to appreciate about it every single time you watch it. Like, there's so many people even right now who are finding new things that to appreciate about Obsession to this day. Very much like John Carpenter with all of his other movies, especially Halloween. Like, anytime you watch Halloween, you find something new. Like, you know, Michael hiding behind a corner, or subtle foreshadowing, or something like that. And honestly, I'm very excited to see what Curry's going to be doing in the future. I think he's making the new Texas Chainsaw in the future as well. But please, for the love of Loomis, Malik Akkad, hire this man to make Halloween 50 in 2028. I would love to fucking see this guy make a movie. But I am very excited to see the future of Curry Barker's career, and he might even become my favorite horror director of all time, if he keeps making horror movies, that is, which I think he probably will, because I think his entire portfolio is pretty much either comedy or horror movies. So yeah. Next up for my likes, I have how this movie makes me feel, and this is the first movie in a very long time that has genuinely made me feel uncomfortable, or just really feel anything of significance. Granted, when I watch like Halloween movies and certain badass scenes, like for example when Michael kicks open the door and smacks the gun into the nurse lady's face in Halloween Kills, and she shoots herself and he looks at her body like, yep, I did that. I always get chills when I see that scene. But like, I never feel like a perpetual sense of dread or uncomfort like I do with this movie. And I think the main reason for that is I can kind of relate to Bear in some way. Not all the way through, because at the point where Bear figures out that Nikki is completely suffering, like, you know, kind of like, it sounds like she's burning in hell during that phone call scene. Like, at that point, I lost all sense of relatability with Bear. But at the start, like, I can relate to how Bear has trouble with girls, because I very much have trouble with girls as well. Like, I am terrified of women sometimes. But you know, the fact that I relate to him so much, and if I were to make a stupid decision like that, and I were to be in the shoes of Bear, I would be absolutely fucking terrified. I'd feel like a complete idiot, but I'd also be completely terrified with certain things that do happen. And I don't even think it's like making a similar decision to Bear, because I don't personally think I would make this stupid of a decision. But like, let's say like the whole wishing part of this movie was completely cut out, like the whole monkey's paw aspect was non-existent in this film, and it was just like a jealous girlfriend who would like kill people if you ever laid eyes on another woman. Like, if I was put into that situation in real life with that level of abuse, basically, I'd be absolutely terrified, and I kind of relate to Bear in that regard. But at the end of the day, that is not the situation. It is basically kind of like a fantasy. For my final, like, and by far my favorite aspect about this movie, and that is the open-endedness of certain situations, and the fact that there are so many ways that you can interpret circumstances or situations, and there's not really like a black and white interpretation. It makes the viewing experience so much better. Like, for example, whether Nikki liked Bear in the first place or not at the very beginning of the movie, before the whole wish aspect even happened, there are certain scenes where Nikki seems somewhat interested in Bear, and there's other scenes where she is completely uninterested in him. Like, for example, at the bar where she calls the bartender baby, which I wouldn't say that in front of somebody that I do have a crush on, but then she talks to Bear as if she's kind of being a little flirty. She's actually a little interested in him. And then there's another scene where they're talking on the car ride home, and he like brings up the thought of them being together, and she's like, ew. But then a couple of seconds later, she's like, if you like me, tell me now, and this is your last chance, or something. Like, I forget what exactly she said, but it seems like a very open-ended kind of thing. If he says that he likes her, maybe there's somewhat of the chance that they're going to be together, but then again, maybe there's not. It's like completely up to interpretation. Another scene that I really like, and I also thought was a little up to interpretation, is the whole what's your take on Cat for My Little Food Critic scene. Rather than me interpreting it as just possess Nikki or wish Nikki being batshit crazy and feeding Bear his own cat because he loved his cat so much, I personally took it as the real Nikki coming out, putting Cat into Bear's food, and basically getting payback at him for basically taking away all of her autonomy. I personally interpreted it as that, but it can be completely wrong, and it could just be that Wish Nikki is just batshit crazy. But that's the beauty of this movie, is there's so many different scenes that are completely up to interpretation. Moving on to my dislikes, and for my only dislike about this movie, I have Bear as a person. Not as a character, but as a person, I fucking hate this guy. This is the most bitch-made, pussy-ass, smelly-looking, gingivitis-ridden, fucking lobotomite-ass motherfucker. I fucking hate him. Not only do you make a stupid-ass wish that completely takes away the autonomy of a human being, and somebody that you seemingly love, like quote-unquote love, yeah, right. Not only do you do that, but the moment that you figure out that it's not actually Nikki that is like in love with you, and the fact that she's also suffering, it sounds like she's burning in hell, all of that on the table, you're still like, what's so wrong with being with me? Fuck off, man. Like, how much of a fucking, I want to say the R word so bad, but how much of a dumbass motherfucker do you have to be to come to that conclusion? And like, if anybody justifies Bear's like actions in this movie and say, oh, actually he's not that bad of a guy, he actually made a lot of really good decisions, you're a fucking idiot. Like, this movie was basically just a RIPE fantasy for Bear. Like, holy shit, man. And I know that I said earlier that I relate to Bear in some way, especially with the whole girl aspect, but after the point where he called the Wish Company right out the gate, try to cancel his wish and give his lover's autonomy, or not even lover, to give Nikki her autonomy back and let her be her own person and actually have her own thoughts and shit. He didn't want to just go there and just cancel the wish outright. He wanted to modify the wish to make it better for himself, because he was just in a little too deep and he only cared about himself. He didn't give a flying fuck about what Nikki felt or how much she felt, or he didn't even actually fucking care about the girl. He just cared about the idea of being with Nikki. After that scene and realizing how much she was suffering and the only way to actually get rid of the wish is to just straight up, you know, neck yourself, I lost all sympathy for the motherfucker and I wanted him to do the deed. I honestly wanted to, actually it kind of took me a little bit to get to that point. After he said what's so wrong with being with me, then I actually wanted him to actually do the deed, because I know, me personally, I couldn't live with myself if I knew that I was actually doing that to somebody that I genuinely love. But anyways, that's all I could really muster for this movie, because what else can there to be said about Obsession that's already not been said before? But let's move on to the Loomis meter. If you don't know what this is, it's basically just a scale from 1 to 6.
I shot him 6 times!
1 being bad and 6 being amazing. And for Obsession, I'm going to be giving it a good old 6 times out of 6. I gotta say, I think Obsession is probably one of the best movies I've personally ever seen. And that's saying a lot because the last 10 years of horror has honestly been amazing. I honestly think that we're probably in the golden age of horror, you know, with all the movies like Hereditary, Sinners, Talk to Me. I even would put Halloween 2018 alongside that. Like, this whole last 10 years of horror has been absolutely phenomenal. I am extremely satisfied, and I am looking forward to the next 10 years of horror, especially with Curry Parker as a up-and-coming, big-time director making Texas Chainsaw, and maybe even Halloween. I don't know, maybe. But anyways, let me know what you thought about Obsession in the... Why am I doing a lore build? Why am I naked? And why is there candy corn in my ass? I feel violated.